Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development, honorable committee members, Excellencies Sparwasser and Kovaliv, it is my pleasure to be with you today to provide perspective on the matter at hand on behalf of the European Union. Since the very first day of the unprovoked, illegal, egregiously unjustified military invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, Europe has been helping Ukraine economically, financially, with humanitarian assistance, diplomatically, politically, and with the provision of weapons through the European Peace Facility. And we will continue to do so. In order to restrict the Kremlin's means to finance this disastrous war, the EU and its member states have also adopted the largest sanctions package in European Union history. We are closely cooperating with our transatlantic and international allies, with Canada being one of our closest partners. We appreciate the timely and efficient exchange of information, as well as the support that Canada has been providing to Ukraine. We appreciate Canada's investment in European security and its commitment to a rules-based international order. To cut revenue sources for Russia from its energy exports, the EU is determined to wean itself off Russian energy altogether. To this end, a decision was made to ban 90% of oil imports from Russia by the end of this year. We have also adopted a ban on all imports of coal from Russia, the export of specific refining technologies, as well as new investments in the Russian energy sector. The EU sanctions regime, however, does not affect goods or technology linked to the industrial transport of natural gas into the European Union, nor is Nord Stream 1 subject to any EU sanctions. In other words, nothing under the EU sanctions regime would have prevented the repatriation of the Nord Stream 1 turbine. The European Commission welcomed the decision by Canada to return a natural gas pipeline turbine to Germany after its repair for use in the Nord Stream 1 pipeline, which has been transporting gas to a number of European countries. With the return of this part, one of the excuses being used by Russia for reduced gas flows was removed. Such flows in the short term help EU countries to stock up on supplies for the winter and are part of a strategy of phasing out our reliance on Russian energy. Russia is continuously using energy supplies as a weapon against the EU and its member states. We have adopted a number of measures to prepare for possible further disruptions of gas supplies from Russia, ranging from diversifying supply sources, speeding up the development of renewables, becoming more energy efficient, and reducing natural gas demand this winter. The EU and Canada have been working together to identify concrete and viable areas for cooperation on the key energy-related commodities for which the EU has a particular need: liquefied natural gas and hydrogen, but also uranium, critical raw materials, potash, and biomass. We are grateful to Canada for its support and commitment to helping with European energy security while deepening cooperation on our mutual net zero energy transition. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, we have the Ambassador of Germany to Canada, Ms. Sparwasser. You have the floor for your opening statement. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity to appear at this hearing. The decision of the Canadian government to grant an exemption for the export of the Siemens gas turbine on request of my country has given rise to much controversy and criticism, and I want to give you the German perspective here. Before I go into the arguments, allow me to place this question in a larger context. This what we're leading today is a very important debate, but it is a debate amongst very close partners and friends. We are all united and allied in our strategic goal. Russia must not win this war of aggression against Ukraine. It must not succeed in its attempt to draw the map by force, and it must not be allowed to destroy the post-war security order of Europe. All governments called upon to witness today here in this room, Canadian, European, German, we are all actively and unambiguously supporting Ukraine against the Russian aggression. We do it politically, financially, and militarily, including with heavier weapons. Together with our partners in the G7, we have decided on unprecedented packages of far-reaching sanctions. And I want to stress it, we are in this for the long haul. As Chancellor Scholz just said, we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We want Ukraine to be free and sovereign and able to become part of the European Union. So our message today should be clear to anybody, and it certainly should be clear to Russia. We are Ukraine's friends and firm allies. We will stay the course. So when we debate now the export of this turbine, or these turbines, we debate about a very important issue, but it's not a strategic one, it's a tactical one. Both sides in this debate have valid and weighty arguments. No decision is perfect, none was easy. It was only after a lot of soul-searching that Germany asked Canada to allow a waiver of its national sanctions regime, and the Canadian government did grant it after difficult deliberations. We're very grateful for the decision. The reasoning behind our request is simple. Our sanctions should impose economic cost on Russia, but they must not harm us more than that they harm Russian interest. As you well know, many countries in the EU, including Germany, are still decreasingly but still dependent on Russian gas for their energy supply. And that's just the reason why Europe, and by the way, the US, sanctions did not include sanctioning goods and services related to the delivery of Russian gas. Canada has been a leader within the G7 on sanctions against Russia. Canadian legislation has imposed nationally a broader sanctions regime. It is geared to hurt Russia. It was certainly not designed to make it harder for the Europeans to fill their gas tanks while quickly replacing Russian gas. Mr. Chair, let me say sanctions are a very blunt instrument. When states impose economic cost on another country, they often inflict unintended consequences on third parties. Waivers allow flexibility, and they allow us to sharpen sanctions. All our countries use them. The US do it. The EU just waived some sanctions on Russia to help open up for Ukrainian food exports and to take away Russia's pretext that the Western sanctions are to blame for the global food crisis. And for a very similar reason, Germany asked Canada in July to allow the delivery of the turbines. We did not want to fall into Putin's trap. He pretended that it was the lacking turbines that was the reason why Gazprom had to cut delivery of gas to Germany and to Europe. We did not believe him then. We do not believe him now. We have seen now how Russia finds more and more pretexts not to take the turbines back. And that is really a case in point. We have called his bluff. With the delivery of turbine, the pretext was gone. Now it's clear for all to see. Russia is using energy to exert pressure on Europe. It's trying to pit one ally against the other. It wants to divide us. We need to resist this. We also need to get out of our dependency on Russian fossil fuels very fast. Germany has already taken a lot of bold steps, and the EU has done it too, as Melita explained. We have achieved good progress on coal. We're out of it. Oil, we're going to be out of it very soon. And on gas, well, on February 24th, our dependency in Germany from Russian gas imports stood at 55%. In the last few weeks, it was down to 30. I checked today, we're down to 26%. That's huge progress. Our goal is to phase out completely out of Russian energy as fast as we can. Today, Germany, as well as a considerable number of other European countries, we will still need it in order to fill up for the coming winter, though. We're trying to fill up our gas storage as fast as we can to 80–90% as the backbone for the winter. It's very important for heating in Europe. We're also preparing for the possibility that Russia will decide to cut off Europe completely or nearly completely. So nationally and on the EU level, we're coordinating a whole measure, a whole bundle of emergency measures. And I will very quickly name just 4. We will bring back what we wanted to phase out, namely coal, and that is very painful in face of our climate targets. We're in the process also of reassessing our nuclear phase out. We may prolong the life cycle of our remaining nuclear reactors. Second point, we share and we save. The EU has just released this gas saving plan. Melita referred to it. And hopefully we will save energy at a rate of 15%, all of the European countries and Germany even more. Third point, we diversify. Our partners in Norway and Netherlands and the US have increased their production in order to make up for at least some of the shortfalls in Russian gas. To receive liquefied gas, Germany is installing now 2 LNG ports by the end of this year and probably 2 to 4 more by the end of next year. And
Ambassador, I'm sorry to interrupt,
long?
but perhaps we could get you to wrap up.
Yes.
It's just that there's so many MPs that have questions. No need to apologize. It's my job to be the heavy. Please.
So, I just want to say we're speeding up our energy transition and we've changed our legislation for that. So just to say, we're preparing for very tough times and we're trying to do it in a way that keeps Germany and keeps Europe strong economically and keeps our sort of the consensus in our societies together. We need to do everything in order to keep us from being weakened. If the economy in Europe and in Germany stutters, that would entail also very heavy repercussions for our joint ability to continue our support of Ukraine. And my last sentence is where I started. We're in this for the long haul. We need to be united. We need to be strong. We need to be there for the support of Ukraine and the rebuilding of Ukraine as a free and sovereign nation in Europe.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And next we have Ambassador Kovaliv, Ukrainian Ambassador to Canada. You have the floor for your opening remarks.
Dear Mr. Chair, dear members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to address. Since February 21st, as Russia started its unjustified war against Ukraine, it uses a wide range of weapons: missiles, tanks, sexual violence, food and energy. We value Canada's leadership and swift parliamentary reactions to be one of the first countries to recognize Russian aggression and war crimes as a genocide of Ukrainian people. You stated the obvious and helped us build alliances around the whole world to recognize that Russia's goal is to destroy Ukraine as a sovereign country and Ukrainians as a nation. We are also grateful to Canada for the steadfast support by providing unprecedented financial support, military and humanitarian aid, hosting Ukrainians who are fleeing the war, imposing sanctions, being the first to introduce tool to seize Russian assets. And Ukraine is grateful for these important actions of the direct support. But Russia's ability to fuel the war is built mainly on its oil and gas revenues that have already exceeded $100 billion for the period of war. The reason why Canada and other allies have imposed sanctions is to deprive Russia of the revenues which it funds the war. We are united with EU partners on the importance to reduce the dependency from Russian energy. This dependency has been built for decades, and unfortunately, with ignorance of its true danger. And people who stood at the origin of this irresponsible policy now visit Moscow for vacations. The urgent steps to decrease consumption have been taken by EU, and we as a country had to make the serious steps in 2014 when Ukraine totally cut off Russian gas supply to Ukraine. And today I am addressing you not only from the position of the country that is over 5 months fighting for our sovereignty, but also from the country that for the decade has been resisting Russia's energy pressure. Our position from the very beginning was that the decision to provide the permit to Siemens turbines was a dangerous precedent that violates international solidarity and goes against the principle of rule of law. And in fact, the waiver has already strengthened Moscow's sense of impunity. We repeat that we stated before. It's clear that Russia's demand to turbines has no technical basis and was aimed only at putting even more pressure. The more you concede, the more emboldened Kremlin feels in pushing for further exemptions. Simply put, it's a slippery slope. I would like to remind you the key facts. First, Russia is able to continue full gas supply to Germany without the turbine that was shipped to Canada. This turbine is still in Germany, and Gazprom announced just yesterday that it will not accept it. Secondly, that's not true that Ukraine cannot deliver and substitute gas delivery to Germany. Ukrainian gas transition system is 40% larger in terms of capacity than Nord Stream 1. And even today, the volume of gas that Ukraine delivers to Europe is bigger than Nord Stream 1 delivers this particular day. Ukraine route has traditionally was delivering gas to Germany, Italy, Austria, and other regions, and other countries of the region. And this is the only pipeline where Russian monopoly Gazprom has no stake. And it delivers gas to Europe even during the war. Delivery through Ukraine route would also provide additional security for 11 million Ukrainian households who are getting the gas from the same pipeline. Dear members of the committee, this waiver is not a one-time decision. The maintenance of all 6 turbines in Canada will cement Russia's ability for years ahead to weaponize energy and to derail the efforts to address climate change. And it will be done with Canada's blessing. The waiver was issued in the claims for better energy security, but the latest weeks have evidence that it only gave Russia grounds for further blackmailing. Russia hostile moves followed. Further gas cut flow, announced another turbine to be out of order, and fully stopped gas supply to Latvia, where Canadian forces are deployed. Today, 12 European countries have been cut from Russian gas supply on political grounds. And Russia is responsible of orchestrating gas crisis in Europe. It's now obvious. And the reason for the waiver was not to allow Russia to blame sanctions for the disruption of gas supply. And now it's more than clear that additional 5 turbines that were allowed to be further maintained in Canada will be turned by Russia into tools of humiliation. And we urge you, do not take the bait. There was no need to waive the sanctions to call Putin's regime bluff and simply liar. You just can Google the history. And this logic of appeasement already failed to prevent the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is eager to work with EU countries on the measures to decrease gas dependency. We are committed to help both by providing Ukrainian gas route, offering Ukrainian gas storages, and by supplying EU with additional electricity that can substitute up to 5 billion cubic meters of gas. And we already are on that way with EU. We are looking forward also to cooperate with Canada on energy security, both for the renewables, hydrogen, and supply of LNG. Let's not forget that since the permit was issued, Russia committed a series of war crimes. Shopping mall in Kremenchuk, Odessa seaport, killed over 50 prisoners of war of Azovstal. Over 160 civilians have been killed only in 3 weeks. Ukraine needs further military support to resist aggressor on the battlefield. And we need sanctions to deprive Russia from economic ability to continue the war. As stated, permit was issued with high hopes of the government of Canada to help strategic partners in Europe. Since this step has obviously failed to bring expected results, we ask you to revise this decision. The permit was stated to be revocable, and nobody wants other 5 turbines to repeat the sad story of the current one. Dear Mr. Chair, dear members of committee, the West has demonstrated unity and commitment to stand with Ukraine until Ukraine will win the war. Let's be tough. Let's be brave as Ukrainians who are protecting the rest of Europe from Russian barbarism. I have no doubt in your support for Ukraine and that your support to Ukraine will continue. And on behalf of all Ukrainians, for that, I want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We're going to go into our first round of questions. First up is Mr. Jenis for 6 minutes. Mr. Jenis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My initial comments will be to the German Ambassador. Your Excellency, as a bit of a personal introduction, I'm very proud of my own German heritage. My grandmother's family were German Jews, and although they lived through very dark times, my grandmother survived the war because of the courage of many ordinary Germans who were willing to shelter her at great risk to themselves. She lived in the Munster area of Germany, where Clemens von Galen spoke out boldly against injustice and inspired everyday German farmers to shelter my grandmother and to sacrifice in the pursuit of justice. Now, I have been carefully reviewing the arguments of your government on this issue of the turbines, and there seems to be a lot of commonalities and talking points with the Canadian government, the same words, the same turns of phrase, etc. I note that while you continually profess friendship with Ukraine and talk about unity, you seem to presume to know better than the Ukrainians do what is in their interest. It seems to me that saying you care but failing to listen is not how true friendship works. Now, as it pertains to the issue of energy, your government is, first of all, acknowledging the reality that the turbines are not needed, and that as far as this summer goes, the maintenance is routine. Your chancellor said explicitly of the turbines that, quote, it would be good if they would be there even though they are not necessary, end quote. The Russians did not need to cut production as a result of the absence of a turbine. The facts make this plain, and you have now acknowledged as much. Instead, as the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress identified, the Russians were running a test. They were testing our resolve, and in particular, your government's resolve, to see whether we and you were ready to sustain support for Ukraine through arbitrary production cuts. According to multiple media reports, your foreign minister, without claiming that the turbines were in any way necessary, told Canada that if the missing turbine led to a stoppage of natural gas from Russia, it would spark popular uprisings and force Berlin to halt support for Ukraine. In other words, your government's argument is not that turbines are needed, but rather that you do not believe that the German people can stomach the sacrifice that would be required if Russia continues to arbitrarily draw down its gas supplies. Sadly, the implication of that argument is that you would do almost anything to get them to increase that supply. Of course, now that Russia has seen your response and has heard your government say these things, they will push further and continue to use the threat of arbitrary energy withdrawal to get additional exemptions to sanctions and other concessions. Now that Russia has seen and been told that you do not believe the German people can sustain serious sanctions and that the withdrawal of energy will lead to popular uprisings, they will continue to exert further pressure, of course. And what really strikes me and bothers me about your government's argument isn't just that it regurgitates the failed talking points of appeasement, but that it seems to demonstrate a low opinion of the courage and propensity for sacrifice of your own people. We all know that sanctions involve sacrifice. Stopping mutually beneficial exchanges between people in different countries is going to have negative consequences for people on both sides. That is inevitable. But while Ukrainians are fighting and dying, not just for their freedom, but for ours as well, I think the least that we can all do is be prepared to bear the sacrifice that sanctions require of us. We must be prepared to give until it hurts if we want to prevail. But your government seems to believe that your own people would give in to the Russian pressure and Germans would take to the streets if the turbines were not returned. Now, personally, I have a much higher opinion of the German people. I believe that Germans have the potential for heroic sacrifice. And unlike these talking points about popular uprisings, I think my view has public opinion data behind it. It was reported by the European Council on Foreign Relations that more than half of Germans already want to maintain support to Ukraine in spite of high energy prices, even absent any leadership from the government on that point. When it comes to a willingness to sustain the sacrifices that are required to prevail against Russia, the problem is not with the German people. The problem seems to be with the policy of the German government and now the Canadian government. Now, of course, the challenges Germany faces are the result of a situation that came about because your country continued to take Russian gas between 2014 and 2021, even though Ukraine was already under Russian occupation. Now, your government, I think, should acknowledge the reality that Russia will constrain or cut off supply at a time and a way of their own choosing, and the only real alternative for Germany is to either completely acquiesce or to stand firm and prepare for all possibilities, policies which become more and not less likely with every concession. So, Ambassador, those are my comments. I will say, I think you have maybe a minute and a half left, and I'll give you the balance of my time to respond to those comments as you wish.
Mr. Chair, am I allowed to?
Sorry, yes, Ambassador, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Genius. There were so many points in there. My first point is that I've made at the beginning of my intervention is I can see both sides of the argument. It is a tactical decision. It is a tactical kind of argument to be made. What is the stronger measure? My government and the Canadian government has also been convinced of that, believe that we have called Putin's bluff by actually honoring sort of the part of the turbine delivery, and we've called the bluff because it is now very clear to see that Russia has not been asking for the turbines in good faith and in order to reset the provision of gas. It has done it in order to blame us with our own sanctions for the fact that Europe will not receive any gas. Second point, like you, I believe that the German population is very ready for sacrifice and is very ready to stand behind Ukraine. This is absolutely true, and if you've seen in Berlin the welcome that Ukrainian families have received when they came, we have about 900,000 Ukrainian refugees, and people are very happy to welcome more of them. You have a very good point when you say we made a huge strategic mistake by creating such a dependency on Russia. It is a grievous mistake. It happened over many, many decades. It was also part of a policy of trying to tie Russia into a European security system. It followed the fall of the wall, where we saw Russia as a member of the European security system.
I'm in the unenviable position of having to cut off an ambassador. I don't cherish it. But Mr. Zuberi is up next for 6 minutes, and perhaps he'll let you complete your thought. I'll leave that to him. Mr. Zuberi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Morans. And I'd like to thank all the ambassadors for being here and recognize that we are all standing in solidarity with Ukraine, each and every one of us, from Canada to Europe. And I'd also like to thank the panel for acknowledging that Canadian sanctions against Russia in their pursuit of this illegal war are very robust. I'd also like to thank our German allies and all European allies and their steadfastness in confronting Russia and supporting the Ukrainian people. This being said, I'd like to start off with the ambassador. Our foreign affairs minister earlier in the previous panel said that sanctions should aim, whenever possible, to pressure Russia firmly, clearly, but also to avoid unintended consequences upon our allies. Does the EU share this view? You're on mute still.
Ambassador, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, if I may answer.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you for this question, Honorable Zuberi. MP. The short answer to your question is the European Union is determined to minimize unintended consequences of our very serious sanctions for third countries as well as for European economy.
Thank you for that. And I know that we all say this together while being very steadfast against what Russia is doing and supporting Ukrainian people. Now, to both the EU ambassador and the German ambassador, our minister, Minister Wilkinson, said that there were no other alternatives to this decision when it came to providing the turbine. Can you speak about the importance of this decision to Germany? And in your view, were there alternative decisions that could have been made by Canada? To both ambassadors Garbeck and Sparwasser.
During the question period, you can just assume you have the floor in response to a question, ambassadors.
Melita?
Yes, thank you, Sabine. I want to reiterate what I already said in my opening statement, which is that we do welcome Canada's decision to repatriate this turbine, both because it took away the pretext that that Russia has been using for reducing the flow of gas, but also because, as you are all aware, Europe has found itself in this situation with energy security because of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and because Europe, the European Union and its member states decided to support Ukraine very, very firmly with different means, as I already explained, ranging from financial, military, political, also support for refugees and so forth. And we are determined to wean ourselves off Russian energy. In order to do so, we need to do that gradually. We already decided to ban 90% of imports of Russian crude oil. We already banned import of Russian coal, and we are determined to phase out our dependency on the Russian gas. Now, in the meantime, in the short term, we need to prepare for the winter, and whatever flow of gas can come to Europe is, of course, helping with filling up our storages. And as Sabine already referred to, we've decided to fill our storages up to 80 to 90% by the end of the year or by the beginning of November. And here I also want to emphasize that we already increased imports of gas, natural gas, from other than Russian sources by 75% compared to last year.
Thank you for that. Ambassador Sparwasser, do you have anything to add to that?
Just what Melita said, we're very grateful that Canada sort of changed or took the waiver in order to avoid unintended consequences of its sanctions. It was something that has been discussed amongst the G7 as well, and our US partners also welcomed that decision. In the meantime, with other sanctions, we have been going ahead and we have been trying to find sanctions that really hurt Russian interests very effectively. So it is sort of a process that we do together.
Thank you. With respect to, I know hypotheticals are things that we don't want to generally engage in, but when it comes to Germany's concerns around if the government of Canada did not grant this permit, what would have transpired? Can you please elaborate upon that, Ambassador Sparwasser?
Well, it's a fifth dimension, it's speculation, but I do believe that the reduction of the use of the flow of gas in Nord Stream 1 would have been entirely blamed on the sanctions of the G7 and the EU against Russia. So it would have been, we're fighting a hybrid war. It's a war on a conventional war that Ukraine suffers and fights very, very bravely, but we're also in a war on energy, we're in a war on food supplies, and we're in a disinformation war. And I think our point of view was that we would have lost significantly in the disinformation war if that turbine had not been able to be delivered. Right now, this turbine sits in Germany. It is very clear that it was an excuse, it was a pretext, because Gazprom is not picking it up and they're inventing very strange excuses for not doing it.
I have to move on now to Mr. Bergeron, who has the floor for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank the three ambassadors for being with us today. It is indeed very much appreciated. My first question will be to Her Excellency Ukraine's Ambassador, Madam Kovaliv. We've been hearing since the beginning of these meetings, of these sessions, an argument which says that this authorization to allow this turbine to go back to Germany in fact, gave us the opportunity of calling Putin's bluff. Everyone seems to agree on the fact that Vladimir Putin set out a trap for us, but are you not under the impression that we fell into that trap?
Thank you. I think there is no need, as I've said, to waive the sanctions to call Putin's bluff. And if we call back to January this year, I will quote, "We will not attack, raid, or invade Ukraine." That was Russian Deputy Foreign Minister saying in January this year. And this and many other examples, including, for example, 24 hours after Istanbul initiative was signed, Putin was with the missiles attacking Odessa port, where the first vessel was preparing to follow to Istanbul and then to Lebanon. And I think this is what we already understand, and it's good to hear that both German government, Canadian government, EU, one more time understood and evidenced that Putin bluffs. And with this turbine, which almost 3 weeks already in Germany, and yesterday very clearly Gazprom said that it will not accept it. So the thing is that why should the other 5 turbines need to be sent to Germany and then to Russia? And we need to all to understand that this waiver is not a waiver to send the turbines in Germany. In precise, and everybody knows this, the waiver directly to Russian war machine Gazprom. And that is the evidence what we all understand now. So I think this debate today need to be focused on stopping and not allowing Putin further blackmail our EU partners and fueling the energy war. So, and this is the only way to do it. It's to revoke, and it was, as it was stated, that the permit is revocable, is to revoke this permit.
Merci.
Thank you, Your Excellency. As the Bloc Québécois, we've clearly established that the following, that Germany and Canada, in fact, would heighten the level of sanctions to compensate for this transfer, be it in terms of military aid given to Ukraine or elsewhere. Canada has made many announcements when it comes to sanctions and military assistance. when it comes to sanctions. We've said this many times before. We are not fully sure that the government of Canada exactly knows the impact of these sanctions, what these impacts are. When it comes to military assistance, I think you would be in a position to be able to tell us what the real impact of these promises of military assistance is. Are you able to receive military assistance within the timelines?
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you for unprecedented financial support that Canadian government has already provided to Ukraine. That helps a lot to many of the Ukrainians to have the access to the social support in the country in the war. And since we are fighting for our sovereignty on the battlefield every day, the so much needed military support in Ukraine is the urgent issue. This was, as we discussed with you when you invited me the first time, and many other meetings that we discussed with you, it's really crucially important to not only announce the military support, but we need it on the battlefield, because each day we are losing the best Ukrainians to protect our country. And we would much welcome that we will have in 3 weeks the Independence Day of Ukraine, that this announced military support will be a great present to Ukrainian soldiers on our Independence Day.
Merci, Excellent.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would like to now ask a question to the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, Excellency Madam Sparwasser. Your Excellency, I was a bit surprised in your opening remarks not to have heard a couple of words in French, because you have beautiful French skills, but you were on Power and Politics NBC's program on the 12th of July. You said that the transfer of the turbine helped Germany save itself from dependency on Russian energy. How did the turbine exactly do that when it comes to procuring energy produced by Russia? Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. I will try to respond a bit in French, but it's going to be a bit more difficult for me.
Of the turbine was supposed to be a measure that would allow more gas to flow initially. We were not sure this would happen. We were testing what would happen, but we had our doubts from the beginning that the Russians would increase the flow of gas. It would be, for the European sake, for many states in the European Union, and for us, it would be would have been very beneficial if that had happened in order to fill our reservoirs. Right now, we're at a 20% sort of flow, and I don't think we're having very high expectations that this is going to increase. What it has done now is to make it very, very clear that the turbine was not the issue. It's the willingness of Russia to try and divide Europe, to sort of cut Europe off. And we are now preparing very actively for the emergency that may be coming this winter. Melita has named the emergency plans that the EU is preparing. I have started to tell a little bit about all the measures Germany is taking, very drastic measures in order to get out of the dependency.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ms. McPherson, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to thank all of the ambassadors for being with us here today. I know this is very challenging, and I want to say that I think the one thing that we all agree on is the importance of supporting Ukraine. I know that we all want to see this horrific invasion, this horrific war end. We all want to see a strong, sovereign Ukraine. And so, forgive me for if my questions come across as harsh, but of course, as a member of the opposition, my role is to question some of the decisions that the government has made and make sure that they are the right decisions. So with that in mind, I think we all can celebrate the fact that there is such a desire for Ukraine to triumph in this war. While there are discrepancies on what we think should happen next, this desire for Ukraine to triumph, I think, is very strong, and I think it's important that the Russian Federation knows that and knows how together we are on that goal. But I am going to start with a few questions, if I could, to our German ambassador, to Ambassador Sparwasser. Obviously, when the turbine was returned, right now we have hindsight, and of course hindsight is 2020. But now we know that the Russian Federation, that Putin has no intention of fulfilling its promises. So in fact, how has the decision to send the turbine back, how has that actually helped the German people? How has that not just, undermined Canada's sanction regime and our collective sanction regime, and not helped Germany in any way?
Thank you for that question. I mentioned the disinformation war. We are all in our society subject to Russian disinformation, in Canada as much as in Germany. To have the pretext, to have Russia be able to say that the fact that we didn't return the turbine is the reason why no more gas is not flowing would have been a pretty difficult argument in the disinformation war. The way we have it now, the turbine is there, they can have it. It's not the turbine that's the issue on the energy supply. Makes it absolutely crystal clear to anybody that Russia has been lying about it, and this is not a necessary thing. So in that sense, we called their bluff. I think that is actually a good thing and a good outcome of the this very, very difficult procedure. And I do want to.
I just if I could interrupt, sorry, but knowing then that this is the reality that we're in, that we've now, as in your words, called Putin's bluff, and that we are in a situation where we know that this was never his intention to provide the natural gas or the gas that Germany requires. Do you think that we should be revoking this waiver? Do you think because clearly sending another 5 is just bad pennies after good? Like, why would we do this now? Why would we not revoke the waiver as Ukraine is asking us to do? What is the value of that now? We've proven that Putin has no intention to live up to his obligations. There is no benefit to the German people. So I don't understand why we wouldn't revoke that waiver at this point.
Well, I think that's something to decide. And obviously, with the turbine not being picked up, that question absolutely arises. And I think we will discuss that in the near future. Right now, I can't give an answer to that. But right now, there is one turbine. Russia doesn't seem to want to pick it up, has declared it won't pick it up. And this is sort of the next steps to consider.
Okay, thank you. And then I actually have a question, if I could, for Ambassador Gebruck. Could you tell me, you speak of the support of the European Union in this situation. Does that include all members of the European Union? Can you clarify whether there was support for this decision from countries like Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia?
Thank you for this question. I would like to clarify that the European Union passed 7 packages of sanctions against Russia, and that all sanctions are actually accepted in unanimity, meaning that all 27 member states have to agree. And all 27 member states agreed to all 7 packages of sanctions.
But was there unanimous support for Canada to waive this particular sanction? Was there support from other countries to waive, to support Canada's decision to waive the sanction on the gas turbines?
The executive branch of the European Union, the European Commission, welcomed the decision by Canada to repatriate the turbines, as I explained earlier, both in terms of taking away the pretext as well as for potentially helping with filling up the gas storages for the winter.
So the executive branch, but perhaps not all of the members of the European Union. Is that accurate?
This welcome was actually issued by the executive branch, the European Commission.
Okay, thank you. And I have, I'm going to go back and ask one more question, if I could, of Ambassador Sparwasser. So in July, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland said that she understood Ukraine's response, but that she defended the government's move. She said, and I quote, that Canada heard very clearly from our German allies that Germany's ability to sustain its support for Ukraine could be at risk. She mentioned that the United States backed this, that it was a position that Freeland described as very significant. I'm just wondering if you could share with us what was the support that the German government was worried that they would have to withhold if Canada did not return those turbines to Germany.
There was not sort of a discussion of withholding any kind of support to Ukraine. We stand solidly behind Ukraine, and we have been amongst the strongest donors on every type of aid on Ukraine. What the remark is referring to is indeed what I've been saying earlier. We're in it for the long haul. We need to be able to sustain it as an economy. As an economy, that's a very important part of the European Union and a motor in it. We need to sustain it also in face of a lot of disinformation. We need to have the full support of our population, which we have now, but we need to also keep it up, because we need to keep up that support for the long haul, and we need to help support Ukraine looking towards reconstruction as well. And again, we need a solid German and European economy.
Ambassador.
Thank you very much for that.
Mr. Bazan, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all three ambassadors for joining us today. It's good to see you all. Would like to first of all, I want to thank Ukraine and having Ambassador Kovaliv here, and just say, first of all of Ukraine is in our thoughts and prayers. We know that you're on the front line, standing up for Western democracy, standing up for human rights, and fighting against Putin's war machine. I'd also want to say this, that as conservatives, if we were government, we would never circumvent our own sanctions regime. We would not have approved the export of the turbines to Germany. In fact, we would have dived in and worked with Germany to provide more of our own natural gas. We would have been making sure that there was Canadian oil and other energy products available. And essentially, we would want to work with our friends in Germany on making sure that they would keep open their nuclear power plants to provide the energy they need to power their homes and their industries, especially during this time of transition away from the dependency on Russian energy products. Ambassador Kovaliv, you've talked about, that this is appeasement. Often we talk about important moments in time as a Chamberlain moment or a Churchill moment. Do you believe that Canada and our allies on this issue of the turbines did appease as a Chamberlain moment rather than standing up like Churchill?
Thank you. And one more time, I would like to thank you for this committee and for the Parliament, for the united support for Ukraine. You've done a lot, including the motion on the genocide, the support of the legislation of seizing assets, and Canada has been leader and example for many sanctions that Canada was imposing the first. And it is, and we do value it. And this is, as President Zelensky mentioned, it is a very dangerous precedent. And we don't want, I think nobody of us want to be also the precedent, the others to follow, but the negative one. In terms of the decision, I think And we heard today the arguments, and we heard these arguments while we were discussing, and Ukrainian government, Ukrainian ministers have some discussions with Canadian ministers and with German government on this. And we were from the beginning very blunt. Because we as Ukraine have went through this Russian energy terrorism. I don't know whether everybody knows, but Russia has already switched gas to Ukraine during the winter 3 times already, 2006, 2009, and 2014. So when we were saying from the very first time that they are bluffing and there will be no renewal of gas supply, I don't want to say it blunt, but we said it, and actually we are where we are, and even more, because when turbine arrived to Germany, Gazprom further decreased gas flow. And this is what we understand from both of the history on dealing with energy terrorism by Russia, but also with dealing with a direct and very barbaric war in Ukraine. Putin understands only power, and Putin understands strength. And in this particular situation, what we see that Putin and his gas monopoly Gazprom is using the power of supplier. And the Europe and our all European allies, and together with Ukraine, we are ready to support to use a power of consumer and not undermine this. And that's why we proposed a very pragmatic actions, not to just cut the gas flow to Ukraine, but we proposed alternatives that are on the table. And by the way, they are today delivering the gas to many European countries.
I appreciate that, Ambassador, Your Excellency. I just know I got very limited time here. And I just want to ask 2 very short yes and no questions. One to our ambassador from Ukraine. Does Ukraine need more military weapons, like sniper rifles, like armored ambulances? And also, if they're just hold on, I got also a question for our ambassador Sparwasser, but more military support, especially in light of the. I guess the sleight of hand of moving these turbines and putting more gas in Putin's war machine, and also to our German ambassador friend, is there a moral obligation here by Germany and the EU, for that matter, to make those sacrifices you talked about, so that we can stop the genocide and the war crimes that are being committed against Ukraine? Yes or no?
I think we feel a strong moral obligation to support Ukraine in its battle against the Russian aggression, and Germany has changed its policy 180 degrees 2 days after the attack. Germany has by now delivered a lot of weapons. I can give you access to the full list if you want, but is also in the process of delivering some very heavy multiple launch rocket systems, howitzers. I'm just checking Gepard tanks, which are anti-aircraft tanks. So we're sending very serious heavy weapons to Ukraine in order to help it defend itself. We're also supporting Ukraine as one of its biggest donors financially and in every other way we can.
Mr. President, I have been fairly lenient with time in this particular meeting, but we are well over 6 minutes. So I'm going to move on to Mr. Sorbera, who has the floor for 6 minutes.
Can I answer the question?
Chair. Ambassador, which one was?
Sorry, can I ask you also, can I answer the question for me as well?
Mr. Sorbera, how would you feel about the ambassador answering this question under your time, and then you can.
Thank you, Chair. I will definitely, if the ambassador wishes to take up some of my time, provide her the time at this moment to answer that question if she feels. Absolutely. Please.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Ambassador. Great to see you today.
Great to see. Thank you. My short answer will be yes. We do value the support of all our allies, Germany, Canada, US, all the European Union and other countries. And yes, we do need more military support.
Chair, I'll begin now.
Yes, I'm sorry, Clerk. I just need to clarify: is Mr. Cervera's around 5 or 6 minutes? Sorry, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk. 5. Okay, my apologies. So, Mr. Cervera, let's go 5 minutes from now. You go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. First thing, I have to say this because I would be remiss if I didn't. I have 3 beautiful daughters at home, and they are growing, and blessed to have them. And I see 3 ambassadors who are female today, so kudos to that. And I do want to point that out because as much as we're talking about many issues of the world, the women's rights and gender equality is something that's very, very important to our government and important to myself as a father of 3 girls. And I do wish to point out, I just want to say welcome to Ambassador Gabrick. Nice to see you again as the chair of the Canada Parliamentary Association. We've had many great conversations, and the recent trip to the Council of Europe was a very productive one for myself, and MP Bergeron was on the trip as well. And I know we had a lot of great discussions with actually including the delegation from Ukraine. We spent a lot of time with them, and it was very, very fruitful discussions. On to the matters at home, because they are matters at hand, excuse me, because they are very serious. And one thing I've learned in politics, it's easy to get into Monday morning quarterbacking and looking back and allaying blame or saying you made a mistake because they're in the past and you can only move forward and make decisions going forward. In governing, you have to make tough decisions and you have to make tough choices. Obviously, we made a decision in terms of shipping back the turbines to Germany or to mainland Europe to be used in for the pipeline, and I think I fundamentally believe it was the right decision. I stated that to the ministers in our government, and it was the right decision. And I think our allies have backed that. But there is a conversation going on in terms of a strategic transition of Europe's energy flows, and energy security is so important for Europe. And yes, there's a dependence. This dependence is being reduced, and it's so important to keep the European populace, the European population, the everyday European that is facing very high inflation rates, very, very high energy rates on side, and to keep our allies united. And I believe fundamentally Putin, in whatever term you want to reference that person, is only about dividing us. And whether it's disinformation, whether it's using food as a weapon or energy as a weapon. So I do first want to turn to the German ambassador. I read your comments. I do want you to, if you could please reiterate the transition plans in terms of reducing Germany's dependence on Russia as an energy source, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sabara, for that question. So Germany is trying to get out of Russian gas as fast as possible. We have reduced from 55% right now to 26% of dependence. We're doing enormous efforts to save energy. We're doing enormous efforts to diversify by getting more energy supplies from many of our partners and filling our reservoirs in view of a potentially very difficult winter, and we're speeding up with every sort of drive we have. We're speeding up the energy transition. Germany has passed a number of laws so that we can now build renewable energy much, much faster. It's being declared in the national interest and security interest to build up renewable energy fast. And we are building up at very high speed also LNG capacity. We are looking towards trying to find long-term partners. We're also looking towards Canada for LNG as a transitional energy, but mostly also for green hydrogen as the energy of the future. And we're going to invest a lot of drive into that.
Mr. Sabara, you still there?
Apologies, I guess I got rusty on the turning off the unmuting. Just to clarify, Chair,
40 seconds. Yeah.
The Ukrainian ambassador left the meeting. I do not see her on screen.
She's in the
Oh, she's in the room. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Quickly to Ambassador Gabrick and then to the Ukrainian ambassador. Ambassador Gabrick, you're here on the ground in Canada. Can you please tell us how the relationship is between yourself, the European Union, and Canada in relation to working on the many issues facing Ukraine, facing energy security for Europe, and doing the right thing for the longer term? And then to the Ukrainian ambassador, I'll turn it over to you for the last 20 seconds if you have any closing comments in terms of what I've stated. Please, Ambassador Gabrick.
Thank you, MP Sorbara. Very quickly, we have had an excellent cooperation with Canada. We have been working together to support Ukraine, also to coordinate, to inform each other about the sanctions against Russia. And we have been looking to and analyzing how Canada can help Europe with the energy security. Among other things, we have now this working group on energy security that was established in March. And that is actually looking at all these potential sources of energy that could be imported to Europe from Canada, including LNG, including hydrogen, but also enhancing our cooperation on critical raw materials. All of this in the context of our joint commitments to a green transition and to net zero economy by 2050. So as I said in my opening statement, we very much appreciate Canada's proactive investment in European security and in supporting Ukraine, but also everything that Canada is doing, all its efforts to find ways to help Europe also with energy.
Apologies, we are quite a bit over time on Mr. Sabera's round. I'm going to have to move on to Mr. Bergeron for 2.5 minutes. You have the floor, Mr. Bergeron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be to the Ambassador of Ukraine. Now, given the dead end that we're facing right now, the alternative of the Ukrainian pipeline, should it be considered once again by Europe?
Thank you. I think that we were very much discussing today about the decision that was made, but I think it is also important now one more time to realize where we are now with this decision. And we are now with this decision not only when the first turbine stuck in Germany, but also with the decision that the other 5 that will be waived to maintain in Canada will actually will allow for another at least 4 or 5 years for Gazprom to manipulate and to terrorize Europe on the energy market. And also we need to be aware that they will definitely use it to tackle our climate change goals, because for them it also a huge challenge while they are the biggest energy producer. We know that. We see it. In Ukraine, Russian missiles already hit 90% of all of the wind farms. They have been stolen and destroyed solar farms. They are precisely attacking, and we see it in our territory, all of the renewable energy, because this is the threat. They also have been, for the many decades, supplying Ukraine with cheap gas, so that all of the Ukrainian production dropped down significantly. And only since 2014, Ukraine cut off the gas supply from Russia direct and increased a lot in our own production. So it is a very dangerous move to leave these other turbines, because we leave the door open for Putin still further blackmail Europe. And I think that is, and I do agree with Ambassador Sparwasser, that it's right now to sit down all together and rethink, because the first attempt to plead Putin failed, as it was obvious for us, and now it's the right time to revoke the sanctions permit, to revoke the permit.
Qu'en est-il de...
What do you think of the Ukrainian pipeline alternative?
From the very first day we proposed to use Ukrainian pipelines. Today, Ukrainian pipeline is already supplying physically more gas to Europe than Nord Stream 1. And Ukraine transmission system is the biggest in Europe. Ukraine has the biggest gas storages, and historically, this pipeline and the flow of gas from Europe, from Russia to Europe, was done through Ukrainian route. And it's also worth to know that Gazprom booked the capacity, paid for it, but using even now 40% for what was booked. So if today Gazprom wants to help Germany with the gas supply, Gazprom can do it. But we all realize with all of the waivers that Gazprom does not want it. But still, we are ready to do it. We are also working with other partners, including Moldova, including our regional partners like Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, to find the new instruments of the infrastructure, new corridors, so that the LNG flow that is coming to the countries who now physically have the LNG terminals in Europe, so that this gas can move also to the other countries of the region. So we were quite open with this. And in addition...
Sorry, Ambassador,
yeah, thank you.
I have to move on. Unfortunately, these rounds are very tight, and we've been going on a bit. But Ms. McPherson, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do want to again thank the ambassadors for all being here. I know this is a very difficult conversation, and I appreciate your honesty and your candor and sharing with us. I didn't get an opportunity to say this to Ambassador Sparwasser, and I wanted to just make sure I got that on the record, that I want to congratulate you and the German government for your reduction in reliance on Russian gas. I think it's very, very important that we note that. To be at 26% in such a short period of time is really, really remarkable. And so thank you for the efforts that have been done by the government, by yourselves, and by the German people. The questions that I have today now are for Ambassador Kovaliv. Ambassador, it's lovely to see you. I wish I could see you in person. That pin on your breast looks beautiful on your jacket. What I'm worried about here is what it means with this when we have allowed Putin to blackmail us, when we have allowed him to act with impunity with regards to this turbine. And I wonder if you could comment on whether or not you are worried, whether or not you think that it is possible that other countries will take this waiver as an excuse for them to not live up to the sanctions that they have put in place, if that is a risk that you have, and particularly around energy, but also around food, because we do know that as well, Russia is using food as a weapon of war.
Thank you for that question. And yes, this was the very first argument that Russia is testing our unity and is testing and pushing to concessions. And every in each concession is actually allows Russia to move further. And even with this particular case, there are the other blackmailing which coming from Russia. If we look on their statements, one of that was issued yesterday. Now they blaming not only Canada sanctions, but also EU and UK sanctions. Does it mean that everybody will also follow the example of Canada and make their own waivers? That was a very dangerous precedent. And I think it's important now to realize that these concessions does not have any real impact, as we see with this turbine. And that is important to actually to fix the situation, to revoke this permit and to show Putin that actually we are all united and strong, showing him that we will not do further such mistakes.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now, I'm the next round, so I'm going to pass the chair to Mr. Bergeron. Do you accept the chair, Mr. Bergeron?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes, of course, Mr. Chair. Mr. Morantz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Sparwasser, I just want to seek some clarity on how this came about. So when you when you decided you wanted the return of turbine, you came to the Canadian government, and as concisely as you can, what were the specific reasons you made to Minister Joly and Minister Wilkinson and others in the Liberal government for the return of the turbines?
Excellence.
Merci. The government, and that means in this case, it was mainly Minister Habeck, wrote a letter to Minister Wilkinson in which he explained that the turbine was a contractual obligation of Siemens to provide service and maintenance to Nord Stream 1, and this was a crucial part of maintaining Nord Stream 1 from functioning, and or at least that the Russian government was saying this was a crucial part, and that the turbine was very important to continue to provide the functioning of Nord Stream 1 for European countries that wanted to fill their gas reservoirs. He didn't, or we didn't say that we totally believed this to be the reason. We always were quite aware that this might be a pretext, but it was the reason given.
Thank you. So you never made the argument then that Canada should return the turbine to call Mr. Putin's bluff during those discussions. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. That argument was made.
And so I guess what I'm struggling with is when the news first broke that Canada was going to break sanctions and return the turbine, that wasn't the explanation that was given, that Mr. Putin's bluff needed to be called. The explanation that was given by your government and our government was that natural gas supplies needed to be restored to Germany. So I'm wondering if that's the case, if that argument was made, why wasn't your government and our government transparent about the actual reasons, not just the flow of natural gas? And you made it clear in your statement, you didn't believe Mr. Putin then, and you don't believe him now. So you never believed that Mr. Putin would increase the flow of natural gas. So that leaves me to believe that the real reason was that you wanted to call Mr. Putin's bluff. So why not in early July publicly say that? Why wait until Gazprom has refused to accept delivery of the turbine to say it? It seems very odd to me.
Yeah. Mr. Morens, what we didn't believe was that the delivery of the turbine was absolutely crucial to the technical ability of Nord Stream 1 to continue to function. That was what we doubted from the very beginning, that this was the case. But we thought, or we argued that it was important to fulfill that obligation in order to make it quite clear that there is a political will to deliver the gas or not to deliver gas.
Very quick. Really, it's a yes. It's a very simple answer. Why didn't you advise the public when the announcement was made that it was to call Putin's bluff? Because that's what you're saying now. Why not a month ago when the Canadian government did it? Why didn't you say that why didn't you give that information to your public and why?
We thought that the turbine was potentially a way of continuing more gas supplies, and we wanted to test it. It doesn't.
But you said in your opening statement, we did not believe him then, and we do not believe him now. So you never believed that the gas flow would improve. It was always about the bluff, according to you today.
It was always about thinking that insisting on the turbine was insisting that the turbine was absolutely technically necessary. That was always the question that we had, and we had it from the very beginning. We were very transparent about it. I could I can't find it to you in a hurry right now. I could read you the interviews that Minister Habeck gave, and it is very clear that this was the case.
Monsieur Morin, je vais devoir vous arrêter ici.
Mr. Morans, I would need to cut your time and give the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. I accept the chair, Mr. Bergeron. And
I believe I'm the next Liberal speaker, Mr. Chair.
On ne vous entend pas, Monsieur le Président.
We're not hearing you, Mr. Chair.
The clerk has texted me that it's Mr. Sarai, but if it's okay with him, Ms. Bendayan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our three ambassadors appearing before the committee today. Your Excellency, Ambassador Sparwasser, I think I'll begin by asking you, in light of comments that I referenced earlier in a previous meeting today of your foreign minister, but also of several comments that you made in your introduction a few moments ago. You mentioned that the reduction of the flow of gas through Nord Stream 1 would have been entirely blamed on the sanctions. And you also stated later in your introduction that there would be heavy repercussions for your ability to continue your support of Ukraine. And so I would like to hear you on the consequences of Canada having refused to grant the request of Germany. How do you feel that would have affected the support of the alliance, the support of Germany, but also of other European partners for these sanctions, given the impact on your population?
Thank you. I believe I've mentioned that beforehand, that this is a hybrid kind of war, and it's a disinformation war. And to have given the argument to the Russians that we brought the lack of gas upon ourselves would have been a strong argument in the disinformation war that...
and the consequence of that disinformation to your people.
Well, it could erode our support in the long term, but as I say, right now support is strong, but we want to keep it that way.
The previous Conservative member asked quite a few questions about the importance of, or not, of calling Mr. Putin's bluff, and questioned, the public communication around calling President Putin's bluff. Obviously, as a poker player, I feel quite strongly that you don't announce that you're calling somebody's bluff when you do it. But I do have a follow-up question to that line of thought, and that is, now that we have called Russia's bluff, is it Germany's view that Canada could revoke the permit following the request, of course, by the Ukrainian ambassador today?
Well, I think we have to see what happens now with the turbine that's there. I would hesitate any kind of guesses on what's going to follow. But obviously, if Russia doesn't pick up the turbine that's sitting there ready and in perfect condition, it creates a different kind of situation.
And so if the turbine never does make it to Russia and continues to stay in Germany, would it be Germany's position that we could revoke the permit?
I don't think we have a position. I think we now have a decision by the Canadian government to support us in this, and we will see what happens. We have to see what happens.
Thank you, Ambassador. And Ambassador Kovaliv, I also wanted to, of course, thank you for your testimony today and for reiterating your gratitude for Canada's support. At our last meeting, you insisted, on the importance of Canada's unprecedented financial and military support, and of course indicated that the history books would remember that Canada stood shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. That continues, obviously, to be a priority for our government, and I hope that that continues to be the way that your government and that Ukraine views our steadfast support for Ukraine, and that this decision was taken in the context, which I just mentioned, of the importance of ensuring that these sanctions remain in place and the continued unity of the alliance.
So, first of all, I would like also to thank you for, as I've already mentioned, for the steadfast support of Canadian government, German government, EU government, and many allies. We see on the Rammstein format, which was already several times, that the number of countries who are sitting in the table and coordinating the support of Ukraine, first of all, the military support of Ukraine, is increasing each day. Because each day the world understands that the war in Ukraine, it's not only the Russian barbarism on one country. The consequences of this war is far below Ukraine and even EU borders. These dimensions of this Russian aggression, as we are today discussing, the energy security, the food security, the nuclear security on the European continent. There are many things that this war brought to the global peace and global order, the challenges. And there is a very clear thing that where we are on the opposite side. If we look what Russia is doing on energy and terrorizing Europe, we, on the contrary, are trying our best to, as much as possible, deliver food and Ukrainian grain to the global markets. Under the threats, unfortunately, many Ukrainian farmers are dying on the fields because of the mines, because of the shellings. But despite that, we are planting, we are collecting harvest with the great support of Canadian government, who are helping Ukraine to buy so needed grain storages to allow the world to get the Ukrainian grains. The first ship already went through, even after Russian missiles attack hit the port. The next 16s are already coming, waiting to come for that. And while Russia is doing the opposite, and turbine is an exact, very blunt showcase of how they are threatening the continent, I think we need to be clear on punishing Russia for that. And as we are talking that the consequences of sanctions don't need to hurt everybody, yes, in the short period of time, but we need to consider what will happen if our policy of appeasing Putin will enforce him to move further. And we need to understand what consequences will be on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador, sorry to interrupt. Mr. Clerk, I realize we're at the hour. I was wondering if there's committee support for another round of 15 minutes.
Sure.
Is everyone agreeable to that, ambassadors and members of parliament? If that's the case, there's four rounds, correct? So maybe we'll do 5, 2.5, 2.5. Mr. Jenis is up next. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's clear to me as we get to the end of the day of hearings, there's a consensus that the delivery of the turbine has and will not achieve anything practically in terms of access to gas. This was supposed to be rather about exposing the Russians and removing an excuse. One turbine has now been sent. The Russians have not restored the flow. I do not believe sending that turbine was the right decision, but if it had any purpose at all, the turbine has been sent, and as it has exposed the point. At the very least, I think we should be able to agree that no more turbines should be sent. And we on this side are strongly in support of the call from the Ukrainian ambassador to, at this point, revoke the permit. It should be obvious that if the government's rationale holds, that the objective they said they were trying to achieve has been achieved, and now no more turbines should be sent. And I hope at some point we're able to get support from the committee for that recommendation. I want to conclude the time and use this round of questions to speak to the Ukrainian ambassador. Thank you for your testimony today, and all of us have been heartbroken to see the atrocities being committed against the Ukrainian people, and also inspired by the heroic courage of Ukrainians. I did want to mention and pay tribute to Emile Antoine Roy-Sirois, who's a Canadian citizen who volunteered to go fight alongside Ukrainians and was killed in action. Of course, he joins many Ukrainian nationals and heroes who have died in this war. But I wanted to mention him as a Canadian citizen who volunteered to join that effort. Ambassador, there's been a lot of discussion about the alliance and about the need to have unity within the alliance. What bothers me about that discourse, of course, is that the most important thing for the alliance in terms of being united is being united behind Ukraine. And there's such an emphasis seems to be being put on Canada and Germany being united in their position, but that position is at odds with the most important ally in this equation, which is Ukraine. And I suspect as well that there are many other nations in Central and Eastern Europe who have the same concerns about this policy of turbine export that I do. So, Ambassador, I wonder if you can speak to discussions you've had with other members of the broader alliance of democratic nations, how they perceive the energy security questions, what the position of other EU members, for example, other than Germany, might be with respect to turbine export, and how the alliance is divided in light of the fact that Ukraine has not been listened to in the case of the turbine issue.
Thank you. And it's really not an easy and rather complicated issue about the energy security in Europe. And because of one big elephant in the room, which is Russian Gazprom. Unfortunately, this elephant was growing for the decades and hurting, buying, bargaining a lot of countries with the different ways. And since the war started, we already have been seeing several attempts for Russia to blackmail Europe. And the first cause was the Russian decision to force the countries to pay for Russian gas in rubles. We see many countries and many European companies who opposed to pay in rubles. And this was the first move. Russia cut the gas to these countries. But they already found the way on how to find the alternatives. There was another big push. Unfortunately, for those countries who accepted to pay in rubles and followed Russia's blackmailing, they turned out in the situation where now they have almost zero gas flow. And this is the two lessons which is important, I think, for everybody now to learn, that any appeasement of Putin's energy blackmailing can be successful. The second important thing that Russia itself already sanctioned, for example, a big Polish route. That could be also the alternative one to Nord Stream 1. We had a story with another pipeline. And pipelines are the best examples of this Putin's policy of influencing Russia to the European policy. This was the story of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We as Ukraine and many Eastern European countries for years has been advocating that this is a purely political project that has no grounds. A year ago, the sanctions from the Nord Stream 2 was waived. But then the sanctions was input back in February this year. And we do value and we do understand that after many lessons, we all now on the same page that Nord Stream 2 has been a political project and now it is blocked. But Russia is still raising this new question. So this is important, one more time, to not to allow to make the mistakes and not to appease Putin. And for many countries of the Europe, especially for those 12 who already face the full cut of Russian gas, they are finding the alternatives. Everybody in Europe is finding the alternatives. And we as Ukraine also finding, since 2014, buying the gas from other sources.
Next MP.
Thank you, Ambassador.
My apologies. Mr. Sadu, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'd like to thank all the ambassadors for taking the time to join us here today. I also want to take the time to commend Germany and, of course, the EU for the transition to clean energy, and, of course, for your solidarity in standing alongside so many allies with Ukraine as we continue to impose sanctions and stand alongside our allies to support Ukraine in this very difficult time. Ambassador Gabrich, as you know from our previous conversations, we spoke about how Canada can help in terms of delivering clean energy to the European Union, of course, to our allies. I want to hear more about the situation with coal-fired plants in Europe right now. We do know it's going to be a tough winter ahead, and it's something that I know you're looking into. Also, I want to ask if you can elaborate on the short and medium-term issues facing the EU should Russia shut off its gas supplies.
Thank you for this question. Indeed, the European Union is actually preparing for the potential possible further disruptions from Russian side of energy supplies. To this end, as I said, I already mentioned that we have a plan to phase out our dependency on Russian energy sources altogether. This plan, it's called Repower EU, is actually envisages to the diversification of our energy supplies, accelerating deployment of renewable energy sources, which we have been doing at great speed. And we are also strengthening our energy efficiency and energy saving efforts. Are a big part of this plan at this point. A very immediate effect. We've decided to, in solidarity, to reduce 15% of our gas consumption demand by 15% in solidarity with one another within the European Union among member states, but also in solidarity, of course, with Ukraine. So we are looking for alternative and more secure supplies from reliable partners such as Canada, while fast forwarding the green transition. And we've been working very closely and intensely on finding these avenues through which we can cooperate with Canada to find concrete and viable areas for our cooperation, and to identify the needs of the EU or match the needs with the capacity of Canada to identify the challenges, to actually also come up with a plan on how to proceed along this line. And of course, the conversation on energy cooperation is ongoing, including through the EU-Canada high-level energy dialogue. And there are options for mid to long-term energy cooperation on the table.
Thank you for that, Your Excellency. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I think we're down to about the last 10 seconds. So
oh, okay,
I think I'll
fine.
just move on.
I'll wrap it up. No, thank you so much, Ambassador. I appreciate that.
Yes, Ms. Bergeron, 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be for the Ambassador of the European Union, Ms. Gabrich. You made sure to signal in your opening remarks that the EU was careful about not imposing sanctions that would risk putting in danger the energy supply to EU member states. But when you saw Canada introduce its regime of sanctions, and knowing that the maintenance of turbines was envisaged, did you warn the Canadian government about what could happen?
On ne vous entend pas, Excellence.
We are not hearing you, Ambassador.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Mr. Bergeron, thank you for your question.
Actually, as I explained in my opening remarks that you referred to, the repatriation of turbines is not in contravention of the EU sanction regime because the goods and technology linked to transport of natural gas is not affected by EU sanctions. And neither is Nord Stream 1 affected by these sanctions. So this is certainly something that I think answers your question.
Oui, sauf que ma question.
Yes, but my question was more geared towards the following. Given that Canada's sanctions were running the risk of affecting turbines, did you warn Canada at the outset about the situation rather than finding ourselves in a situation where we have to manage this unfortunate outcome?
Not that I am aware of. I am also not, I would also venture to say that this would not be something that would be in a prerogative of the EU.
Maintenant,
Okay, since we are seeing that this was only a pretext from Putin's side and the European Commission declared that the return of the turbine takes away this pretext, why maintain this authorization?
Mr. Bergeron, I'm sorry, we're at 2.5 minutes. Perhaps you could submit your question in writing to the clerk and get an answer that way. Ms. McPherson, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Madame Gabrich,
maybe Madame Gabrich could respond in writing to the members of this committee.
Yes, is that acceptable? Thank you. Ms. McPherson, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, and that will wrap up the witness portion of the meeting.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you to the ambassadors for being here. I guess what I will end with today is just, ultimately what has happened with the result of this waiver is that we still have no energy supply that is necessary going to Germany. We are still in the exact same situation. Unfortunately, we just have a undermined sanction regime, but we do still want to ensure that Germany has the support that they require to get through the winter and to manage their energy crisis. And so I would ask Ambassador Sparwasser if she could please comment on what Canada could do more to help Germany right now. To help in the short term, I think, is really what we're looking for those solutions for.
Thank you so much, Ms. McPherson. The Canadian side is helping by backfilling as much as possible into also the U.S. effort to provide Germany with more LNG. We have been receiving from a lot of our allies, Norway, Netherlands, U.S. and others, quite a bit more LNG. We've been importing it. We're building up LNG ports very fast. In the medium term, in the long term, Canada can be a very important supplier for our energy security, and Canada can be one of the countries that allows us to pursue our two goals: become independent of Russian energy and to fight climate change and to become carbon neutral. And we see Canada as a prime partner working as a transitional energy, maybe on LNG, but mostly working on hydrogen. And we are actively right now pursuing talks with government, with provincial government, with companies. This is a very big target for us as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I'd like to end with Ambassador Kovaliv. Ambassador, what would you like to see Canada do? How can Canada support Ukraine more at this time? I'd like to give you the final word for this session.
Thank you. And given this opportunity, I would like to thank you, everybody, for devoting your time for this particular matter, to the Canadian government for the steadfast support, for Canadians who are helping Ukraine, standing with Ukraine, and helping those Ukrainians who came to Canada fleeing the war. It's very important. And the war is going on, and it's very important for all of us, Government of Canada, EU, Government of Germany, and other allies, to continue this support, because we need to win this war, not only for us as the country, but also for everybody, for us as being a democracy. We do value the support of all our partners, and we do fighting hard on the battlefield. And we do count on further support, further standing with Ukraine until our victory. Thank you for standing with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I can't say in my brief time as a member of Parliament since 2019, I've never seen Parliament so unified and steadfast on any issue than this. And our hearts and minds are certainly with you. And as the one of the ambassadors said earlier, I'm sorry, I can't recall which one, this is a debate among very good friends. And I think that's the spirit in which this meeting was conducted. And I want to thank you all very much for answering our questions and your patience with our system in terms of how we time the allocation of rounds. I know it's a little annoying from time to time. So with that, I think we can release our witnesses. And again, thank you very, very much for being here. Now, I see a hand up. Mr. Genuous.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was going to just suggest we have a quick conversation about when we're going to meet next, because we had talked about a number of different witness panels we wanted to hear on this subject. I think maybe rather than having a standalone meeting again to discuss committee business, it might be good to just exchange for 5 minutes to figure out.
Chair, I'm going to say a point of order, if I can interject, please.
Sure, Mr. Barrett.
Yes, Chair, we've gone past, we're now 5:18, we've gone past the 5 o'clock time. We asked for 15 minutes of extra time. It was unanimous consent. We went over. I move to that we just adjourn the meeting now, please.
Yeah, just on that point of order, Mr. Chair, you can't move a motion when you don't have the floor. So, I mean, the point of order, I mean, you're allowed to raise a point of order, but you can't move a motion on the point of order. I'm not trying to move any motions or anything, colleagues. I just think it's a point of discussion here. When do colleagues think we should meet next? And I mean, I think we had committed to working to try to get to the bottom of this issue. And I mean, if members prefer, we can schedule another meeting for committee business, I suppose. But I think it makes sense for us to just to try to identify when we're going to meet next to proceed with this work.
I'm not sure if that's a point of order, but
no, it's not a point of order. I'm not raising a point of order. I put my hand up to speak.
Okay. Well, I guess is there an appetite right now for the committee to discuss scheduling our next meeting? I see one head nodding in the negative. Okay, let's take a little straw poll here. Ali, you don't get to vote.
So thumbs up for yes to a discussion right now about schedule?
We're not going to have it. It's something you probably need unanimous consent over.
Yes.
So I guess we're going to have to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, if the committee should only adjourn based on majority consent as the principle. So I see that it seems conservatives in the NDP want to have this discussion. I'm not sure where Mr. Bergeron is at. He would be the deciding vote. But
Chair, did you not just adjourn the meeting?
I said I guess we should adjourn. I didn't say we are adjourned.
In practice, the principle is that it's consent of the majority of the committee is the standard for adjournment.
Point of order on that. I just want to say that having chaired a number of committees over the years, it requires unanimous consent to adjourn a meeting. So as long as members want to talk, you can talk. And I would also just say that talking about the agenda of the committee, based upon what we just heard, is also in order because it is relevant to the business at hand.
Mr. Clerk, just some clarification on this. What are the rules around adjourning?
We need a majority to adjourn the committee.
So it's not unanimous?
No.
As Mr. Bazan said, because I have seen situations where someone moves adjournments and then there's votes and it's a dilatory motion.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, may I order a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
Sorry, I had the floor, Mr. Chair. So maybe just to make this simple,
No, he didn't. He didn't acknowledge. He hadn't acknowledged you. So I made a point of I made a motion, and
it should
be voted on. Thank
you.
You
didn't have the floor, Mr. Sarai. Sorry, Mr. Sarai, you didn't have the floor. Mr.
Yeah. So, Chair, look, I'll just make this simple. It's up to the majority of the committee to decide how they proceed. I will move a motion that we have now a 10-minute discussion about the foregoing business of the committee. So I'll move that motion, and I suggest we vote on it. And if there's a desire to have that 10-minute discussion, we'll have the 10-minute discussion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is any discussion or debate on the motion? I don't see anyone's hand up, so I guess we'll go to a vote. Mr. Clerk, could you call the vote, please?
Je m'abstiens.
Mr. Sorbara.
No.
Mr. Sidhu.
No.
Mr. Sarai.
No.
Mr. Zuberi.
Abstain.
Mr. Lippert.
No. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. In favor.
Mr. Bazan.
In favor.
Mr. Genius.
In favor.
Monsieur Bergeron.
Mr. Bergeron. Madame McPherson.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a tie vote. We have 4 yeas, 4 nays.
So as I understand it, I have the deciding vote, so I'll vote yay. So the meeting will continue now for 10 minutes, and we will discuss. Anyone want to start?
My hand is raised, Chair. If you.
Oh, sure. So, Mr. Janice, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So I would just propose the following: that we schedule Ukrainian Canadian Congress to provide an additional hour of testimony. That we gather witnesses from parties as per the original motion, and that we schedule additional meetings on this issue next week and the week after, in order to continue the work that has been begun on this urgent issue, and that the chair be asked to schedule witnesses that are proposed by the various parties in rough proportion to those parties, and if necessary, in consultation with the vice chairs as per the standard practice, but that we continue to hold hearings on this subject next week and the week after in order to get to the bottom of this, and that as part of that, we hear from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress for an additional hour. So that's what I would propose, generally speaking.
Madame Ben Dayan, Mr. Chair, Ms. Ben Dayan is on the list also.
Ms. Ben Dayan, you have the floor.
Je suis désolée, Monsieur le Président.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I did not mean to interrupt the order. Is there someone who needs to go before me? Mr. Bergeron has his hands up.
doing this virtually. Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I find the motion presented by Mr. Genuis extremely confusing, so I wouldn't have the idea, I wouldn't dare venture on it. That there seem to be many elements in the motion. First, to bring the UCC back. We can't do something we can't do directly, indirectly either. So I'm not against the idea of inviting the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. And I'm saying this again. This is not the first time I've said this in committee before. This is not the manner of imposing a witness to the committee. We have ways of working that goes through the subcommittee, for instance, or an informal meeting of the committee where we discuss witnesses. We send witness lists to the clerk simply to have this kind of discussion. So I am announcing my interest right away. I will vote when we have this discussion in favor of inviting UCC back, but I don't think that it is the right moment right now today to do this, because we have to be able to discuss the entirety of witnesses and not just pick and choose. So I will vote against the motion, even though it is a bit confusing, and it will be only for this reason that I'm voting against.
Before I get to Mr. Genis, Ms. Bandine, did you want the floor?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I am happy to have heard my colleague, Mr. Bergeron, because I fully agree with him. Maybe we can envisage a procedure, a normal procedure, whereby we can discuss these issues, but also establish deadlines for members of the committee to propose other witnesses. I'm very open to the idea of inviting the Ukrainian Canadian Congress back. And we heard them today, of course, and there are many other witnesses who would be interested in coming in to discuss these issues in committee with us. So I don't really understand why we are insisting only on this particular witness. Normally, our panels have multiple witnesses. So, as the chair, you mentioned that we had 10 minutes for this discussion, and I'm looking at the time, and it's already 5:30 almost. I don't know if this will result in anything concrete in the upcoming meetings. Maybe we would need to schedule another discussion some other time. Mr. Chair, I think I still have the floor. I will end by proposing that the committee be adjourned now.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it's a motion to adjourn.
Okay, it's a dilatory motion, so Mr. Clerk, will you please call the vote?
Madame Bendayan.
Oui.
Mr. Sobara.
Oui.
Mr. Sidhu.
Yes.
Mr. Sarai.
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi.
Yes.
Mr. Lippert.
Against.
Mr. Bezan.
Against.
Mr. Genuis. Sorry.
Against.
Monsieur Bergeron.
For.
No.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 yeas, 4 nays. So the
motion passes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.